you very much for being with us. I have to say I'm very excited to moderate this discussion because we have here around the table perhaps some of the representatives of the most exposed sectors to cyber threats, at least this year. ING, who protects, of course, a very valuable asset, aka money. NATO, that protects secrets and information. And the Paris Olympics. That's going to be the most watched event, at least this year, with a huge reputational risk. So, Franz, I'm turning to you first. You're in charge of coordinating this cybersecurity strategy. We're expecting, at least according to certain estimates, 4 billion attempted attacks on the IT infrastructure. Now, you started preparing with the National Cybersecurity Agency here in France, InCyber, but also private sectors like Atos. How prepared is France?
Tough question, and no pressure about the Olympics, by the way. Yes, we began preparation 4 years ago, so we did anticipate a lot. The Olympics in Tokyo did not take place at the moment. And we've been working for 4 years, beginning basically from scratch to build our cybersecurity strategy. We coordinated as much as possible with a lot of actors, public actors, obviously, but also the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, the previous organizing committee, Tokyo, a little bit of Beijing, some experts from previous games, and like you mentioned, we use the services of a lot of experts too. We work with Eviden and Cisco mainly on cybersecurity, but we also try to coordinate a whole ecosystem around us, because the games, it is not only the organizing committee, which is delivering the ceremonies, the competition, which are the heart of the game, but we are part of something bigger. It was mentioned by Vincent earlier. This is France that will be on the front line during next summer, during the Olympics and the Paralympics. So today, basically, we are where we wanted to be. We've been working for 4 years. We are still 121 days to go. So the clock is ticking. But it's working as expected, and every morning I have a new issue to solve, a new problem to address, but that was part of the deal. Generally speaking, I saw, working closely with the ANSI for the past 4 years, a lot of improvement in the general ecosystem. We see that small and medium businesses are much more committed to cybersecurity. We see that ANSI has improved its game, its level of commitment, and there is a true involvement of many official partners, obviously, but also key actors in the ecosystem. And I do think that will be part of our success together during next summer.
Maybe briefly, how did you prepare? So were there audits, perhaps, of stadiums? Can you share that information with us? Or I know it's a sensitive issue, so...
Well, on the one hand, we did basically what you do with your own organization. We design a strategy, we run a lot of risk analysis, and we decided what would be our roadmap for 4 years. And then we had to deal with some very specific issue, because we are a short-lived organization. There is precious few experience. How many people in here have already organized the games? So I didn't. It's very difficult to get that kind of expertise, to get relevant, up-to-date expertise. So we thought a lot, we tested ourselves a lot. And so with ANSI, with other partners, we do train a lot, because one of our key assets is that next summer, we know that something will happen. Whatever the numbers, there will be attacks.
It will happen.
And we will have to be ready.
Now, just also, it's important to understand that you had to prepare 4 years in advance, because the attackers also prepare in advance, and they tend to try to infiltrate ahead of time, not just the day of the games, but way before that.
Yeah, exactly. And over the past 4 years, I did experience a lot of high and lows following the global activity and news. We saw the international situation evolve the way you saw it. We saw discussion regarding integration of some nation into the Olympics. We saw the latest development in the news. All of this will also impact the attractivity for hackers for the next summer.
Very well. Now, I was saying earlier the geopolitical situation. Given this geopolitical situation, how much of a target is NATO by hacktivists today, and how, Manfred, how have you seen the level of threat and the level of attacks evolve in the last few months?
Well, thank you for the question, Julia. Good morning. Good morning, everyone here. I'm very, very happy to be here. So a geopolitical event has an impact on the threat landscape, obviously, and therefore on the risk that we're taking. And so when we saw the renewed aggression of Russia to the Ukraine in February of 2022, there was a big impact that came from that. And we saw the same with October 7th of last year, the conflict with Palestine, with Israel. And so in that case, we saw an uptick of activity from Hezbollah, from Iran. Earlier, we saw a slide that had Russia and China on there, and Iran. I would add a fourth country to that, and that would be North Korea. I think what we see from North Korea is particularly commercial activity. They've been under severe sanctions for a long time, and one way to get around sanctions and to get money into the country is through criminal activity. So that is something that we see a lot. There's a lot of technical sophistication that we see coming out of China. So all of these four countries, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, there's a lot of activity that we see coming out of these regions.
So we've been talking about the AI paradox earlier, but I'd like to ask all of you this question. How is AI changing the cyber landscape? On one hand, we have to protect ourselves from attacks that are going to be supercharged with AI. And at the same time, we need to be able to harness ourselves, AI, to be able to detect a little bit better threat detection.
Yeah, so I think indeed from the offensive side, the element of deception is now really a factor to take into account. Of course, phishing has always been there, social engineering, but what we've seen over the last year and a half in uptick in quality of generated images and voices, etc., is really impressive. So I think from that side, it really increases our threats. That said, I think if you look on, for instance, the coding side of the attacker, so we're all kind of afraid, like Gen AI will help attackers get us, fantastic code, super code. Our current estimation is that, well, we're not at that point yet. So, of course, it may, like attackers that have relatively little experience with coding, give us an extra edge, but in general, we're most concerned, of course, on the top segment. And I think, well, we're following the developments there, but we have some slack there.
For some reason, we have this idea that attackers, and I don't know where this is coming from, but we have this idea, at least from an outsider's point of view, that attackers are perhaps going to be even more tech savvy, more rapid in the fact of harnessing AI. Why do we have this image? Why don't we know more about the defensors that are as good, if not even better? Because we never talk about all of the attacks that don't...
that fail. Yeah,
that fail, exactly.
Yeah, luckily, 99.999% of the attacks fails. It does not lead to major impact. But what we see in the news, of course, is the result of numerous organizations being attacked. So it maybe reinforces this fear factor. But of course, on the defensive side, we see a lot of successful defensive actions. And I think there's also some voices concerning AI that it's actually far better for defense than for offense. Mm-hmm. And I think there's lots to say for that, because these techniques finally give us the edge and the processing edge to make use of all the data that we have. So if you talk about normal behavior, we should be fully knowing that as defenders. I think AI will help us there to get us the right tools, the right defense mechanisms to pick the right anomalies.
Manfred, how is AI changing the landscape? I was reading an article saying that specifically North Korea and China were starting to harness, I'm saying those countries, but of course it's attackers from those countries. I don't know how much this is state-sponsored, but at least they're harnessing AI for certain types of attacks. Is it something that you're seeing as well? And how do you see AI changing the landscape as well?
We don't see that yet. So it's interesting, Tom, what you said earlier. We have not seen this onslaught of offensive AI activity coming towards us. I think it's really not happening today. I think it will happen in the future. I would give it about 10 months, 12 months, maybe a little bit longer. But I think this is something that is around the corner. And that's something that we need to prepare ourselves for. But right now, really our activity on the AI side is on the defensive side. And there's a lot of projects that we've gotten into of really using the power of AI to do log correlation, to look at events that are happening in the network that a human being would simply not be able to grasp, or you would have to invest a lot of time in looking at all of these little things that are seemingly not connected and to bring them together. And that's really one of the powers of AI, to be able to see things that would be overwhelming, I think, for human beings.
I fully agree that, let's say, the amounts of data, the complexity of our infrastructures.
If you can just...
Sorry.
Thank you.
So the amount of data that we have, the complexity of our infrastructures, the application landscape, doesn't scale with hands. So that's what we are trying to keep up with. AI, we should really be smart in using our data, using the techniques to get an extra edge.
Franz, on this question of AI changing the landscape, how do you see things going forward?
On the one hand, I saw over the past few months the sophistication and the likeliness of AI being used in attacks growing simultaneously with our own effort to mobilize our ecosystem around us. And nowadays, I'm very worried that AI will increase mostly the quantity of attacks and the likeliness that low-profile organizations are now interesting to attack, to target for attackers. So this is systematically speaking, a growing concern, something to be addressed, especially in the context of a large-scale event like the games. On the other end of the spectrum, as a high-visibility organization dealing with a lot of VIPs and famous people, the possibilities to impersonate VIPs, the likeliness of very sophisticated social engineering attack is also a growing concern, because there we are basically reaching new ground. This is unknown territory, and we have to think outside the box to determine how do we project ourselves, how do we prevent our VIPs from being targeted, and how do we train them to reject everything their senses, their mind tells them.
Now, Tom Martin, banks, we were having this conversation with Bernard Gavgani from BNP Paribas as well. It's the most targeted sector probably today, directly in general through their end users. How has AI and data analysis probably changed the way that you identify vulnerabilities and detect threats?
Yeah, so in various ways. So if you look into vulnerability management, we if you look into what is the sweet spot for AI, and well, we talk about AI, nice sexy term. We do a lot of machine learning, so which is maybe a bit older, but let's use AI. So we do a lot of machine learning, and the sweet spot is where you have big quantities of data and only few specialists. Vulnerability management is such a thing because there's quite some in-stream of noted vulnerabilities with a general severity score, but to translate this general score and the context information of this vulnerability towards, okay, is it really relevant for our organization? Do we need to take action, and which priority? So we're currently developing models to aid that process. So it's accelerating the human decision there. That's one aspect. Another aspect in detection models is that we are developing models to, for instance, ingest the let's say, old school, rule-based alerts that we are generating. I think AI gives us a unique opportunity to learn far better and achieve far more with, let's say, static rule-based detection as we have it. So we learn on top of the output of that models. and which outperforms, and it's shown time by time, that it outperforms rule-based systems of detection.
Now, Manfred, we often talk about Russia attacking, you said it earlier, China, North Korea, Russia. But recently the Kremlin said that they were experiencing an 80% rise in the number of cyber attacks on their infrastructure, especially on governmental website. So who is attacking them? We know that some European countries have changed their doctrine for a more offensive one to be able to protect their vital interests. So who is attacking Russia today, and how warm is the war in cyberspace?
I think that's an interesting question. I think we should ask Russia who is attacking them. That would be a great conversation to have with the cyber commander there in Moscow. I don't know. I think we can really only speculate. So one thing that I do know is it is not NATO itself. We are a defensive organization that is really enshrined in the Washington Treaty. So we are not doing offensive cyber. We do a lot of defensive cyber. Now, in looking at our member nations, at our 32, there's very different policies that each one has, right? And offensive cyber is a national prerogative, and you would have some countries generally in Europe that are maybe a bit more conservative with that. And then you would have the United States as an example that in the past has been very open, and it has been reported in the press about offensive cyber operations in a number of countries, going all the way back to the spinning centrifuges in Iran about maybe 15 years ago or so. So it was a short question and a very long answer. I don't know, but I think there is the thinking over time is also changing, I think, with allies on how far to go from a defensive into an offensive cyber. But it's really the national prerogative and sovereignty of each individual nation.
It's very difficult because it's a battlefield that we, the public, don't have an eye on that battlefield. So it's really complicated to understand exactly what is happening in cyberspace today. Franz, what is the worst case scenario? We're talking a lot about the opening ceremony on the Seine River. I don't want to talk about your worst nightmare, but
that's a recurring question. First, you have to keep in mind to understand that everything is based on technology during the Olympics. Everything you see, everything you hear, everything you experience during the games will be mediated through technology. Beginning with broadcasting, obviously, because most of the spectators will not physically attend, but going backward to access control, logistics, transportation. We have to address lots and lots of very specific problems because the numbers are huge. We are talking about 15,000 athletes, 26,000 media and press accreditees. We are talking about 45,000 volunteers and more than 40,000 employees and partners during the games. We'll operate, let me remind, more than 12,000 workstations during the games, and our network, it's 400,000 kilometers of optic fiber, Earth, Moon. So this is a huge information system.
Sounds like a corporate.
Exactly, that's basically a major business information system, but 4 years ago, there were 150 of us. So big ramp up. To protect that kind of system, you have to run lots and lots of analysis. You have to wonder, okay, what is my business? What are my areas of exposure? And so we did a lot of work to determine, as an organization, as a customer for existing installation, what would be our risk. And basically, we have a map today of all of our risk, like you probably already do. We assess them in terms of likeliness and impact. So there are three main families remaining. First of all, obviously, is everything deals with human and physical safety and security. This is something we have to consider. Some technological systems are used in security, so the likeliness of them being compromised is very low, but the impact could be concerning. Then we have the core of our concern, which is anything that could affect operation, sabotage, basically. Anything that could affect our ability to broadcast, our ability to time to score the competition, our ability to communicate over tens of sites and venues between thousands of people operating over 15 days. We will have up to, I think, up to 15 or 20 competition active simultaneously at times. These people have to coordinate. And lastly, as a reminder, we are a private organization with a 96% private budget. And so our income and our brand, because our brand is very powerful, are very important to us. And anything that could affect this brand, this income, the trust from our partners. So, for example, our social medias or the ticketing system are also key to be protected.
Just listening to you speak, I'm thinking, how are you sleeping at night? But it also makes us think about how much we've become maybe more vulnerable by being so connected, because as you said, everything is technology today.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that's part of the challenge. Not only do the Olympics take place only every 4 years, and 4 years in the technology landscape, it's a long, long time. But beyond that, the stakes are growing every time because they are more and more connected, because basically the athletes, the accreditees, all the officials, they expect more and more services, and it's the sense of history, and more services means more and more technology, and means in the end more and more cybersecurity concerns.
Tell Martin, for the cybersecurity sector to be able to harness this AI, we need to understand it better, to use it a lot, ramp up its understanding as well. But another way is also to preempt it and to try to create tools that are AI safe, AI by design.
Very relevant. And there are two aspects that I want to emphasize there. One is, of course, we want to have transparent tools because we need to understand what we operate. Otherwise, you cannot, let's say, guarantee the level of security. So transparency in the sense of knowing what a model does, if it produces output on basis of what is it. I have to also give a caveat, because in a model that you train on data, yeah, of course, you know on which features, which variables you use. But if you're talking about big data training, you're never fully sure. So we can describe in statistics, etc. But of course, let's say transparency in the models, what we know is really important. The second aspect, and it's not so much used, I've seen the slide in previous presentation with MLOps, is that everything that we build now should also be maintained. It has a life cycle, and I always describe it as we're building mini applications, and of application, we know that 60% of all the effort is going into maintenance. So with every organization that is starting, please incorporate the maintenance of AI, because otherwise it will degrade, it will not work in time. So the maintenance aspect is really in your methodology, but also in your organization. Dedicate the right resources to it. Otherwise, it's a dead end.
So please have a holistic vision when you create an AI tool.
Think with the end in mind. Yeah.
All right. Now, speaking of a holistic vision, another way to do it is, of course, to create this ecosystem, to share experiences and information from the field. Manfred, on this topic, how important is it for all sectors? We have different sectors here around the table. How important is it to exchange and to talk about what's happening on the field?
Very. And kind of to expand upon a little bit on that, so there needs to be a constant and a frequent interaction between industry, academia, the private sector, and the public sector. And there's various fora where this takes place. Some of them NATO sponsors, some of them are in different ways. This particular conference is a good example, right? It brings together people from government, from the private industry, from academia, from various places in the whole ecosystem. So I think the interaction is very much important. So at NATO, what we do is we have a natural system that we use to communicate with our 32 allies, and that is very, very helpful on the political side, on the military side, on intelligence sharing, as well as reaching out to industry, to academia in those areas. But it's very important. The only way how we solve the cyber problem, and I'm not sure if it's really solvable in the end, but the way how we progress with that is by working together, by comparing notes, by comparing best practices, and that's what we're fully committed to doing.
Well, we're coming to the end of this panel. Thank you very much to all of our guests for joining in and for sharing their experience. Indeed, we're just going to take not a break, but we're going to turn now to a prospective forecasting exercise, if you will, just to help us imagine what the future could look like with new AI threats, to help us also identify which levers we can now act on and as of today. So please welcome now on stage Cecile Wendling and Adrian Taylor. Please do welcome them, and thank you all.